Chapter 731. When this name rang in their minds, even their breathing became a little stagnant. Crack. The sound of the comic book falling on the floor, and Hoshino's reaction stunned the youth. "Vice Captain, what's wrong?" Hoshino paused for a second, then took off his headphones and looked at the TV screen in front of him. His white shirt and beige sweater gave people a warm feeling. But those who were familiar with him could tell that Hoshino was different from before. "Which team is this guy from?" Hoshino pointed in a direction, and the young man just smiled, his eyes bright and teeth white. Him. I think he's from Supreme Alliance, not Xiangnan." In the eyes of the Sakura Stream Squad, the only team that could be called a rival in China was Xiangnan. They didn't even need to use all their strength to deal with Xiangnan, let alone other teams. Hoshino looked down, his hair falling down, the ends sliding over the bridge of his nose. "Supreme Alliance. Vice Captain is interested in them?" The person lying on the sofa pushed himself up with one hand and jumped down from the sofa. The corner of his mouth was half-curved. "Coincidentally, I'm also interested. Who's the one who defeated Little Cutie? I really want to see it for myself." "Oh right, they will be participating in the revival match this time." The youth was stunned. "Watanabe, are you crazy? You want to go to the crime scene together? Do you know how many of our fans there will be? We are international, especially with your face that often broadcasts and participates in variety shows. Besides, Vice Captain won't agree to your request, which is obviously because you're bored." "Okay." Hoshino looked away from the screen and interrupted the youth. Then he put one hand in his pocket and turned to walk towards the room. This was a way to avoid people seeing his expression. The youth and Watanabe were both shocked, pausing for a moment. "Vice Captain," he agreed. The youth couldn't believe it. Watanabe was very happy. "Ha ha ha, I can finally go out and play. I heard that the food in China is very delicious. I'm so bored in the apartment that I'm about to grow hair. Quick, go and see if we have any disguise clothes, especially masks, or we will be recognized." The baby-faced youth didn't understand. For some large activities, the vice captain would use the excuse of sleeping to refuse. Why did he agree to watch a small revival match today? Watanabe was smart, flicking his head. "Didn't you see, Vice Captain, that Spadesies?" "What? You seem to care a lot." Hoshino was indeed very concerned. That facial features and feeling were obviously Z. But the boy in the video was younger than Z. Or rather, Z when he was young. His hair color was also wrong. Z's hair was darker than everyone else's. Their clothes were also different. The Z he knew. She was used to wearing a hooded black trench coat, so no one could see her face. The youngster on the screen was obviously different. However, there was no mistaking the feeling of him looking at her with his brows raised. Z was good at disguising himself. How to find the real Z? This was the tacit understanding they had developed over the years as partners. He had to see that youth with his own eyes. To confirm something. Why did Z become like this? Chapter 732. The popularity of the show continued. There was a place where the television couldn't be seen. Han Susu was the trigger for the incident with the Han family. But the person who went in was her father. In this circle, this was normal. Han Susu's ability to accept it wasn't good. The Han family was investigated. All their assets were confiscated. How could Han Susu get used to such a life? But some people's brain circuits were different. Since she had no money, she became a waitress. Wasn't it written in novels that a poor girl would always meet her Prince Charming like this? Although some people didn't dare to have anything to do with the Han family, they didn't reject Han Susu out of respect for old Madam. But Han Susu really thought that life was like a novel. A waitress didn't know how to respect customers at all. She behaved like the young mistress of the Han family, arrogantly looking at everyone. Of course, she didn't think she was wrong. She felt that this was her pride. When she was in a bad mood, she would tell everyone she met how heartless her grandmother was. She didn't know that the reason she could stand here now was because of old Madam. The manager was really helpless against her. It wasn't easy to control her, giving him a huge headache. After all, Han Susu used to be famous. She came here to work so that she could meet those people again and get them to take her away. After all, with her beauty, she rushed upstairs with all her might. The manager stopped her. She felt that she was being reasonable. If you continue like this, leave. This was what the lobby manager could no longer hold back and blurted out. Han Susu's face turned pale. She pinched the edge of her skirt, thinking that she couldn't leave this place. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. It was low and had a unique indifference. All of you leave. Han Susu turned, her face filled with surprise. Brother Chin. She really didn't expect to see someone she knew again. She wanted to pounce on Chin Mo. Chin Mo stuffed one hand into his trouser pocket and took a step back. His thin lips curved up, but there wasn't a trace of warmth in his eyes. Inciting people to splash Coke and taking the lead to question me online. When you did all these things, didn't you think that I would find you? Han Susu froze. I didn't. You do. Chin Mo took a step forward and lowered his voice. Why did you do all these things? Han Susu clenched her fists. That's because he's a disgusting gay. I've spent so much money to support him, but he's still pretending to be aloof. His official fans are the same, paranoid and wary of me. What the hell is this? Big brother Chin, don't be fooled by him. He's by your side not because he wants to be your brother, but because he wants to be with you. If Sister Wu didn't tell me, I would still be in the dark. It's her again. After Chin Mo asked the question he wanted to know, he straightened his body, his voice slow. Han Susu felt that something was wrong. Chin Mo's voice drifted over slowly. Who told you I wanted him to treat me as a brother? Han Susu opened her mouth. Chin Mo glanced at the manager beside him. Fire him. Yes, President Chin. After hearing this, Han Susu screamed. Brother Chin, you can't do this to me. My brother is so good to you. You will suffer retribution for treating me like this. Her voice echoed in the lobby, extremely piercing. Chin Mo didn't even bother with her. Chapter 733. Deputy Zhang, who was waiting outside, reached out to open the car door when he saw Chin Mo. The moment his young master alighted, he had asked him about the results of the investigation before rushing over to look for Chin Mo without taking a break. The unknown malevolence was buried in his eyes, his entire aura cold. Send the people back from the Wu family. Chin Mo sat on the sheepskin seat, his handsome face faintly discernible in the darkness. The Wu family was different. Deputy Zhang placed his hands on the steering wheel, glancing back with uncertainty. The Wu family should have restrained themselves. With old master and around, sending the people back seems... send. Without any unnecessary words, his face was as exquisite as porcelain, the contours clear. It was a Chin Mo that was rarely seen. Deputy Zhang knew that under normal circumstances, no one would be able to change his young master's decision. Are you still going to keep an eye on Miss Wu? Are you going to tell young master who she interacted with and what she did? Chin Mo shut his eyes, crossing his legs. Yes. Deputy Zhang understood that Miss Wu's actions had probably crossed his young master's bottom line. Otherwise, he wouldn't have treated an old friend in such a manner. Just as he was deep in thought, a voice came from the back of the car. Head to the Han family after you're done. Give old Madame Han what she needs. Yes, young master. Dealing with Han Susu but not implicating old Madame Han was his young master's principle. Old Madame Han was a person worthy of respect. Those who came from the military knew that. At the same time, Deputy Zhang knew that old Madame Han's greatest need was money. The Han family had failed and their accounts were in a mess. Old Madame Han was such a righteous person, but if her descendants didn't live up to her expectations, she wouldn't be able to enjoy her old age. Deputy Zhang knew that it wasn't a good time to transfer the money. The money that young master withdrew was enough for old Madame Han's living expenses. Hence, he stopped the car and sent them to the residence. The moment they entered, the sound of a teacup shattering could be heard. Han Susu shouted, "In the past, your words carried weight because you wanted us to rely on your connections. Now that the Han family has fallen, don't even think about controlling me. You old hag, you have a dark heart. I'm your biological granddaughter. How could you harm me like this? I don't even have a job now. What's wrong with you going to the Chin family to say a word?" Old Madame Han supported herself with a walking stick, But her old eyes weren't muddled. It was this gaze that made Han Susu feel disgusted. She looked like she was about to hit the old man. Adjutant Zhang twisted her wrist and pushed her away, looking at old Madame Han. Old Madame Han shook her head. "I've let you see a joke. Please don't say that." Adjutant Zhang respected old Madame Han very much, so he behaved like a soldier, and was very polite. Old Mrs. Han shook her head again. Han Susu was afraid that the person beside Qin Mo would do the same thing to her, so she hurriedly hid to the side. Adjutant Zhang didn't care about her at all, taking out a thick envelope. "Young master instructed me to pass this to you. Young master said that when you were young, you would always cook for them. In the future, when old Madame Han is in a difficult situation, she can go to the North Courtyard. There are all old people like you there. It would be great to live together." It was a straightforward retirement arrangement. Chapter 734. Please keep it. Deputy Zhang raised his hand and saluted. When he walked past Han Susu, his gaze was cold. Han Susu was smart. She knew what the envelope was. It had been a while since she had seen such a thick stack of cash. She reached out to snatch it. Old Madame Han looked at her and slammed the wooden stick. "Beast!" Han Susu didn't think she was wrong. She snatched the money and sneered. "Old woman, that's all you can do. You didn't save me previously. Take this money as atonement." Han Susu scolded the old woman. With this money, she could continue to squander. She wouldn't have to return to this empty shell again. The old woman wanted to use money to get her brother out, so she could do it herself. This person wouldn't be able to harm her anymore. She was going to have a feast today. Oh right, she had to buy a dress. It had been a long time since she attended a gathering in the circle. This time, she had to be beautiful. At this moment, Deputy Zhang was sitting in the car. He watched as the figure ran further and further away. He turned and asked Qin Mo, "Young master, do we need to?" "No need." Qin Mo held a pen and wrote a check. His voice was calm. "This is for the old woman. Let her spend it. Once she gets used to it and can't quit, someone will punish her." Deputy Zhang looked at the check. He instantly understood why young master had asked him to write an envelope. In this world, there was a cause and effect for everything. For Han Susu, if she knew her place, she might be able to survive. But if she didn't, she would be a joke in this circle that valued status and background. That person had snatched her only relative's money to do the most vain thing. The price she had to pay was not even her bones. Deputy Zhang felt a chill run down his spine when he thought of this. He asked tentatively, "Did young master predict this from the beginning?" Dealing with people like this was really killing without spilling blood. Qin Mo glanced up at him. "I didn't ask her to snatch her grandmother's money. But you expected it." Deputy Zhang looked up. To the young master, it was easy for him to see through a person's mentality. Moreover, it wasn't difficult for him to analyze a person's actions based on their mentality. This was also the reason why the Huaxia organization was afraid of him. It had been a long time since the young master had dealt with someone like this. This made Deputy Zhang think that the young master only knew how to play games apart from business matters. In fact, apart from him, no one knew how powerful the young master was. However, after that incident, he never touched any more cases. No one knew what had caused the young master to lose some of his childhood memories. Perhaps only the young master himself knew the truth behind this. Other than young master, there was also Director Huang, who had been in charge of the case with young master. The boss and madam had asked Director Huang about it. Director Huang only told him to give his young master some time to get over the knot in his heart, because he didn't know much. Deputy Zhang could still remember the look of the young master at that time. He seemed to be in a state of confusion, and didn't seem to have any emotions. It was only after meeting the young master of the Fu family that it regained some of its liveliness. Just as Deputy Zhang was thinking about it, Qin Mo unlocked his phone. The youngster's unique voice entered her ears through WeChat. "Brother Mo, I'm at your house now." After sending the message, Bojiu glanced up, smiling at Madame Zhang, who had brought the tea over. "Thank you, Madame Zhang." Madame Zhang found the girl in front of her rather familiar, but she couldn't recall where she had seen her. Chapter 735. Madame Zhang didn't dare to keep looking at her since there weren't many people who knew where the Qin family's main house was and could enter. Besides, she was here to look for young master. Madame Zhang was still in disbelief. She turned and glanced at the person drinking tea on the sofa. Coincidentally, Bojiu caught her gaze. She arched a brow and smiled faintly. Madame Zhang, what's wrong? No, nothing. Madame Zhang was in a daze. If only Madame was here, she would be able to analyze the situation. But she was the only one in the house. Ah, right, there was a cat. Princess, who had been walking elegantly beside the sofa the entire afternoon, was now bristling as though an unruly person had barged into his territory. But Madame Zhang found it strange that Princess didn't pounce over to give her a scratch. Even when Miss Wu came in the past, the princess would scratch her head. Why was it that when it came to his daughter, she had a different reaction? Why was there a different reaction? But Princess knew. This vixen's aura was clearly that of someone who threatened to cut his tail. Meow. This was a disguise to rebel. Meow. Princess meowed happily. Bojiu rested her chin on her hand and looked at him lazily. She was holding a cat toy in her hand. At this moment, Princess hated his instincts. The cat that would throw away its dignity and pounce on the thing placed in front of him wasn't him. Heh. Bojiu smiled when she saw Princess's expression. What she meant was, you can't win me as a cat. You should just behave and be a cat. Princess started meowing again. Bojiu bent down and poured some water into his bowl. Princess snorted. You know what's good for you? He lowered his head and licked the water with his pink tongue. His body was unbelievably fat. Even so, he had a lazy and noble aura that ordinary cats didn't have. His snow-white body and chest puffed out made him look like a king. Bojiu reached out and caressed his head. She waited casually for his reply. The scene was so beautiful and harmonious that Madame Zhang started to suspect her eyes were playing tricks on her. It was unbelievable that the princess would allow her daughter to rub her head. Usually, when the princess took a bath, the young master had to personally do it. If it was someone else, it would really rebel. Buzz, the sound of the phone vibrating interrupted Nanny Zhang's thoughts. It also made Princess raise his head and look at the owner of the phone. Bojiu tapped on the voice note, and a familiar deep voice came through. I'm going back now. All right. After she replied, she caressed her tummy and replied, I'm hungry. What are we going to eat later? Unexpectedly, after she sent that message, the Almighty didn't even bother replying to her voice message, and called her instead. Bojiu arched a brow. Hey, Brother Mo. What do you want to eat? Bojiu listened to the sound of the lighter. The Almighty didn't seem to have any requirements for such things, so she replied lazily, meat spicy hot pot. After hearing the answer, a voice that seemed to be laughing yet not laughing came over. What else do you eat besides hot pot? Bojiu replied seriously, rice. The next moment, the voice on the other side of the phone laughed. She didn't understand what was so funny about it. Chapter 736. So easy to take care of. Rather than saying it was easy to take care of him, it was more accurate to say that he always ate the same few things. Hot pot, meat skewers, rice, instant noodles, and chocolate lollipops. Moreover, every time he ate these things, he would have a blissful expression on his face. Just thinking about it would inexplicably make him feel better. Qin Mo held onto his phone, watching the reflection outside the car window, his gaze gentle. Pass your phone to Madame Zhang. Bojiu. Oh. The moment he heard that voice, Qin Mo could imagine the scene of the youngster following his instructions and passing his phone to Madame Zhang. After a short while, the person on the other end of the line changed. Hello, young master? Madame Zhang was puzzled. She didn't believe that girl could contact her young master. Qin Mo said, Madame Zhang, listen to me, stay further away. All right. Madame Zhang was confused. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Let's eat hot pot tonight. Don't cut too much meat. His eyes get allergic easily. Steam a pot of rice. I'll be home in an hour. Let him eat when the rice is ready. Watch him and let him drink more water. Madame Zhang's eyes widened. She had never seen her young master so concerned about anyone before. Bojiu wasn't used to wearing a dress. There weren't any pockets, which meant that there weren't any sweets. Now that she saw Madame Zhang's reaction, she was curious to hear what her puppy had said to Madame Zhang. Why did she look so frightened? All right. Madame Zhang nodded with much difficulty. Qin Mo held a cigarette between his fingers, a playful smile on his face. Is he standing beside you, trying to eavesdrop? Mh. Madame Zhang never knew her young master had such a childish side. Qin Mo laughed softly. There's a bag of sweets in the drawer in my room, chocolate-flavored. Pass it to him before you cook. Yes. After making the call, Nanny Zhang hung up the phone. She looked at her daughter in front of her with an even more unfathomable gaze. The main thing was that young master actually knew how to give a girl candy, and it was specially prepared. This was really strange. Bojiu blinked when she saw that gaze. Madame Zhang seemed to be treating her as an unknown. But very quickly, she tossed this matter aside. After Madame Zhang went upstairs and came down, she passed her a bag of lollipops. As long as there was food, it was the most perfect thing in life. Bojiu bit the lollipop and opened the magazine in her hands. She was still thinking about using this posture to see if she could straighten him when she met the Almighty. If it really didn't work out, then we'll talk about it again. At this moment, Qin Mo didn't expect the youngster to have such thoughts. Even more so, he did not expect the other party to wear female clothes. Hence, when Qin Mo walked into the Qin family's house and saw the slender figure sitting beside the steaming hot pot, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Madame Zhang was the first to see Qin Mo. She greeted, "Young master." Bojiu tilted her body and glanced over, her lips still carrying her unique smile. The corners of her eyes were raised, but the color of her hair had changed. Her long hair was growing without restraint. Her face was still the same, but under the contrast of the black chiffon dress, there was a hint of exquisiteness. Under the light, the tear mole under her brows was alluring, like the illusion of a water demon. Their eyes met. Chapter 737. In the next second, before Madame Zhang could react, her young master had already grabbed her daughter's wrist, heading towards the second floor. This. Madame Zhang covered her mouth, her expression changing. Bojiu arched a brow, but before she could speak, she was pressed against the door. Qin Mo lowered his lids, his gaze inching closer, his breath carrying the slight coldness from outside. He hadn't forgotten. For some reason he was certain he was gay. His dreams after nightfall were all about the person in front of him. So many times he had dreamed of tearing her clothes apart, bullying her harshly. Now this guy doesn't want to live anymore. After his confession, she still had the guts to cross-dress in front of him. Qin Mo tightened his grip. Bojiu didn't try to break free. Instead, she stared into Qin Mo's eyes, her lips lifting. "Brother Mo, looking at me now, don't you think a girl is better?" His boiling blood was instantly extinguished after hearing this sentence. Qin Mo watched the person in front of him, his voice cold. "Is this the reason for cross-dressing? You want to tell me a girl is better?" Bojiu was good at reading people's expressions. She knew the Almighty was angry, and was thinking about how to express her desire to straighten him out. Qin Mo's gaze turned colder and colder, like the deep sea, without any warmth. Even his nobility couldn't suppress that unique indifference. "I like men, and I will only like men forever. Does my liking make you feel so uneasy? So uneasy that you are using cross-dressing to change my mind? It seems like you really can't accept me, but I won't give up on my feelings for you. Keep your thoughts to yourself. Don't make me angry." Bojiu opened her mouth. Before she could say anything, a familiar coldness came from the side of her lips. It was a cold kiss. It was cold from head to toe, just like Qin Mo's heart. Bojiu had always wanted to straighten him out, but she had forgotten that a person's sexual orientation couldn't be changed. Even if she didn't want the Almighty to be gay. But she understood now. She didn't want to, but the truth was the truth. In a trance, those thin lips moved to her ears and threatened. "Jiu, you don't seem to understand your brother too well. Once I set my eyes on something, I will never let it go." With that, Qin Mo retracted his hand and stood there with his back straight. For some reason his voice was deep and cold. Change into your clothes before coming down. Bojio stood in the same spot, watching as the figure disappeared by the door. She wondered if she should keep her distance. The Almighty's attitude explained everything. He didn't like her as a girl. Unfortunately, she was a woman herself. That was good too. Bojio glanced up at the night sky. She and the Almighty didn't belong to the same world. Her identity as the young master of the Fu family would last for another month. Before she leaves, she will confess everything. Similarly, he had to forget about his life here. Bojio reached out and wore the black t-shirt. There was a dagger at the side of her waist. She lowered her eyes and laughed. This was the reason why she couldn't be the real Fujio. She was Bojio. The Bojio who was born in darkness and would return to it. She would always have a knife on her body, just like how she would never give up on being a hacker. Just based on this point alone, she and the Almighty would only be opponents, not friends, and definitely not anything else. Chapter 738. Downstairs, Madame Zhang had wanted to ask her young master who the daughter was. But when she saw Qin Mo's icy expression, she swallowed her question. When she was placing the bowls and chopsticks, then she heard a low voice. When did he come? 5. He has been waiting for young master. Madame Zhang studied Qin Mo's expression, unable to understand his thoughts. Only when the silver-haired youngster walked down in a black t-shirt did her eyes widen. Just now that daughter was young Master Jio. That explained why young master was so concerned about her. If she was young Master Jio, everything made sense. But were all boys like that? Did they like to wear female clothes? Bojio noticed Madame Zhang's expression and smiled at her. Madame Zhang was still digesting the news since the daughter was too pretty and didn't match the handsome youngster. Let's eat. Qin Mo's voice was faint. Madame Zhang knew that her young master wasn't in a good mood, but she wasn't sure why. This hot pot meal was probably the quietest hot pot meal the two of them had ever had. In the past, their interaction wasn't like this. Especially the youngster, who was a man of few words. He was polite and even waved at Madame Zhang after the meal. Madame Zhang, I'm going back. Thank you for the hot pot. When Madame Zhang came out, she could only see the youngster's smile. Qin Mo gripped the cup tightly, his knuckles turning white. He stood up. I'll send you. It's still early, it's convenient. I called for a cab online. Bojio opened her hands, showing him the screen. Qin Mo didn't say much. After the youngster left, Madame Zhang realized something wasn't right. Under normal circumstances, her young master would always try his best to get young Master Jio to stay the night. Even if he didn't stay, he would send him home personally. But this time, he just stood outside. After an unknown period of time, the wind seemed to have started to blow. Assistant Zhang hesitated before walking out with his coat. Young master, let's go back, it's getting late. Qin Mo's fingers twitched. In that moment he didn't feel cold. It was as though there was a hole in the depths of his heart, allowing the wind to enter. It was empty. He had never thought about what he would do if he couldn't turn him gay. It was a very obvious sense of distance. It emanated from the youth's body. Qin Mo asked himself again. What was so good about this person? If he wanted a good-looking woman, he could find one anywhere. Those who were gentler than this fellow could be found everywhere. Young master. Adjutant Zhang said in a low voice. Qin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette, the smoke filling the air. Give the Fu family a call and ask if young Master Jio reached home safely. Yes. After Deputy Zhang finished speaking, he glanced at his wrist. Young master, the revival match is tomorrow. Your hand is important. Hearing this, Qin Mo took a step forward in the night, allowing the dampness to hit his body and the smoke to surround him. It was Chen Xiaodong who picked up the call. After hanging up, he looked in the direction of the second floor. Yes, my young master has returned, yes. To be honest, there was clearly something wrong with the young master today. How should he put it? He spoke too little. Even his smile was different from before. As soon as he entered the door, he went straight into his room. Chapter 739. Chen Xiaodong couldn't find an answer. because he didn't know that sometimes, the revelry of a group of people would show how lonely the person who didn't fit in was. The first stop of the revival match. This day was the last chance for all the Supreme Alliance members. The youngster skateboard, sweeping through the long alley like the wind. Outside the arena, the fans were already looking forward to it. The cheers they could hear weren't any lower than the semi-finals. Because everyone knew that Supreme Alliance was participating in this year's revival match. That wasn't all. What made the fans even more excited was that person's return. Swoosh. The car door was pulled open. The first thing that caught their eyes was the pure black uniform, fluttering in the wind. Many female fans couldn't help covering their mouths. The media had once said that Chin Mo's appearance was no less than an A-list superstar. This time, it was even more so. He stood in front of the car, tall and straight, his side profile handsome. His left hand was wrapped in a white bandage, like 1,000 layers of petals spreading out, cold and indifferent. The two words, Supreme Alliance, floated in the wind like dragons and phoenixes. Some of the teams at the side saw it and realized that it wouldn't be easy for them to win this time. Because Chin Mo was back. Chin Mo's return attracted some teams that didn't need to participate in the revival match. However, they sat in the audience seats, wanting to see how good Chin Mo was. In the resting room, Lin Feng bent over to tie his shoelaces. He raised his arm and naturally placed it on Yin Hu's shoulder. Are you worried? Of course not. Yin Hu tilted his head, his lips still filled with arrogance. The two of them wore the same uniform, and when they stood together, they looked especially compatible. The revival match wasn't just a test of skills, it was also a test of the team members' endurance and stamina. That's right, stamina. A high-intensity consecutive match. 5 matches in a day. Each match would take at least 2 hours. Such intensity was a form of training for the contestants' eyes. Moreover, they had to consider tactics and how to recover their hand speed. Every team had to measure their members' fitness and endurance before arranging the order of appearance. It was different from the other teams that talked about strategy. Chin Mo held a cigarette between his long fingers, looking as handsome as a celebrity. Finish it quickly, don't waste time. Not too much, not too much. Lin Feng arched a brow, turning towards Bo Jiao who was putting on her uniform. Little spade, captain's words mean don't nag, just do it. I also think it's better to win as soon as possible. The young man looked up, his porcelain white canine teeth biting on the zipper. With a tearing sound, he finished putting on the battle uniform, but the smile at the corner of his mouth was still evil. Otherwise, how can we show our standards? Lin Feng snorted. These two people were really of the same path. They were really shameless. He also had to consider the feelings of the other teams. Everyone was still discussing strategies, but these two were actually thinking about how to save time. Take it easy. You might be able to kill quickly, but Sister Yao and Baby Monk won't be able to keep up. Lin Feng opened a bottle of water and shot her a look. Bojiao glanced back and smiled. She didn't say much, rolling up the sleeves of her uniform. She bit on her lollipop and stretched her legs casually. Her legs were loose, looking devilish. Chapter 740. Chin Mo's gaze was calm. The voice that came out of his thin lips was graceful but deafening. Let's go. With that, everyone stood up. Everyone stood up. Their postures and appearances were all different, but because they were all wearing the same uniform, they gave off a fiery aura. The lights shone down. The cameras were aimed at one spot. When they walked out, he felt as if something had collapsed at this moment. Even from the camera, it could be seen that the audience's eyes were overflowing with light when they saw these people. Supreme Alliance will definitely win. It was a cry of support that came from the bottom of their hearts. They didn't want them to stop here. They wanted to keep winning. I didn't expect this team to be so famous. In the corner of the audience, there was someone with a half smile. Just a look at his figure was enough to tell that he wasn't bad looking. But he was dressed up tightly. When he spoke, he pressed down on the brim of his cap to avoid the passing fans. On his left was a slender figure. His eyes were like ink as he stared at the silver-haired youngster. His high nose bridge was accentuated by the flashing lights. He didn't speak. However, It could be seen that among the 3 people who came, he was the most central one. Ayaya, there are so many people in China. There was a baby-faced youngster with black-rimmed spectacles and a school bag. He pushed his spectacles up and sized them up. We only see such a huge crowd during the National League. There aren't usually so many revival matches. The number of people in different countries is different. Why are you carrying a teddy bear bag? Aren't you childish? Watanabe, who was wearing a cap, reached out and flicked the youngster's back. The baby-faced youngster widened his eyes. What do you know, this is called disguise. The 2 of them were about to quarrel again. Let's find a place to sit first. The man standing in the middle said calmly with a magnetic voice. Ah, I know. The baby-faced youngster stretched out his hand. Vice Captain, you want to sleep, right? I bought 3 tickets for the quietest seats. It's perfect for watching the competition. If you're bored, you can rest here. What's there to rest for? Look at the beauties around us. Watanabe had always been a playboy. Someone once said that he was only in love with esports. Other than esports, there was nothing else that could keep him going. The 3 of them sat down. Only Hoshino's gaze was focused on the arena. As for the other 2, one was playing with his phone out of boredom, and the other was lowering his hat. In short, no one really cared about this revival match. After all, an international esports team like theirs did indeed have the right to do so. It wasn't arrogance, but it was the most normal behavior. The revival match had officially begun. There was a line of words clearly written on the screen above. 1v1. The members of Supreme Alliance, Chin Mo. Just the appearance of that name. The neon lights converged into one beam. Whispers could be heard from all directions. They were talking about the man who was already sitting in front of the computer. Elegant, abstinent, handsome. However, he was such a person. But it only made his opponent feel a little. An indescribable chill ran down his spine. Was Supreme Alliance here to revive? He was clearly here to get back at them. As soon as it started, Almighty Chin appeared. Chapter 741. Swish. The sound of the game's sound effects sounded. Before the crowd could react, Lin Fan had already left. Chin Mo's slender fingers were already pressing on the keyboard. The computer version of Hero was different from the mobile version. Hand speed was very important. But Chin Mo gave people a feeling that he was not in a hurry. When the audience reacted, they found that he was actually using one hand, and the other hand was just a support. This made the opponent angry. He couldn't hold back his temper and directly jumped over from the wilderness, wanting to sneak attack. But at this moment, Chin Mo's operation suddenly changed. However, at this moment, the opponent didn't notice it. Only the audience who could see the full screen knew. Chin Mo was switching pages. He was so fast that before the audience could remember this image, he had already switched to the next one. Just when the audience didn't know what Chin Mo wanted to do, the crisp tapping sound of the keyboard could be heard. No matter how messy the image was, it didn't seem to affect Chin Mo's operation. The mouse moved to the right place, and a fierce kill. At that moment, almost everyone could see that the brilliance on the screen transformed into a long spear. The blade advanced tens of feet with an unstoppable momentum, like a shooting star in the Buddha's light, heading straight for the person who thought he could sneak attack him. The person wanted to dodge, but found it was too late. Because when the long spear was horizontally, it seemed to draw a god's domain. His movement became slow, and he turned back, wanting to stab the opponent. Not to mention his hand speed, he couldn't even distinguish the image in front of him. The screen was full of brilliance. Though, the first drop of blood. He was dead. And the person sitting opposite him. His black hair was covered by the headphones, his side profile was handsome, and his facial features were mixed. His operation didn't slow down at all. Not only fast, but also very stable. Less than a second after his death, even the defense tower was attacked by the opponent. The empty arena was silent. No one moved, only their mouths were open. They were even replaying the changes of Chin Mo's fingers when he attacked in their minds, but found it was too fast to form. Commentator. At this moment, Chin Mo spoke. Even the commentator needed his reminder. Cough, Almighty Chin's move. The commentator hadn't finished his words. He was swallowed by a burst of cheers. The audience no longer needed commentary. They just wanted to watch the replay. How could Almighty Qin feel so good when he kills? He even pushed down a tower. He killed his way through. In just a few minutes, the competition would be over. In fact, it didn't take much. Bojo supported her chin lazily. Her long and narrow eyes lifted when she saw Qin Mo's operation. Her smile was captured by the cameras and the crowd screamed again. The Chinese fans are so passionate. I'm so envious. The baby-faced man looked at this scene and his tone was filled with yearning. Hoshino's eyes were fixed on the screen in the middle of the screen. The youth's face flashed by, and that expression that he was most familiar with. Other than Z, he couldn't find another person like him. However, what kind of disguise could make someone look several years younger? Supreme Alliance's captain is not bad. Watanabe's attitude was a little sloppy before, but now that he looked at the slow-motion screen, his eyes narrowed. Not bad. Chapter 742. Watanabe remained silent. It was rare for the youth to be so serious. What's wrong? Nothing. Watanabe was probably analyzing how he would deal with that move. After his analysis, he laughed. It isn't bad, but it isn't impossible. The maneuver wasn't flawless, but once he thought it through, it wasn't that bad. The youth couldn't understand why he was concerned about the captain of the revival match. The only thing he wanted to see was the skills of the person who had beaten him on the Japanese server. Of course, he didn't think he was that good. After all, his teammates weren't his true comrades, they were the preparatory team. But he couldn't deny that the maneuver in his memory was indeed cool. As the youth thought this, he tilted his head and his back couldn't help but tremble. The vice-captain wasn't sleeping, he was watching the match. This was too strange. One had to know that when attending such events, the vice-captain would usually sleep. Supreme Alliance won this match. This time Watanabe's interest was piqued. He placed his arm on the railing, his fingers sliding across his lips as he watched Qin Mo move the mouse. Such a person. Even I feel like going down to fight him. Hoshino lowered his lids, following his gaze. The youth spoke softly. Watanabe, hurry and shrink back, someone is looking at you. How troublesome. I should have worn a mask. Watanabe was helpless, pressing down on his cap and shrinking back. At this moment, he wasn't afraid of female fans. He was most afraid of male fans. After all, there were more guys who gamed. Once in the game, there were more guys who would watch the video tutorials. As a face that kept appearing in the tutorials, Watanabe was more likely to be recognized by the guys. The chances of Watanabe being recognized by the guys was much higher than the girls. Otherwise, the few otakus sitting over there wouldn't have turned around to look at them frequently. The youth was slightly worried. Shall we leave? We just started and you're asking me to leave. It wasn't easy for him to come out for a break. Besides, Watanabe found the captain's playstyle interesting. The youth was depressed. We came out behind the club's back. If we were to be discovered, they'll blame me. Hoshino's voice carried a hint of a smile. The youth was shocked again. The vice-captain had never been like this before. The vice-captain he saw today must be a fake. It's over. Watanabe's eyes flickered with the light of a hunter. How long did it take for him to win? The youth wasn't interested. What about it? The opponent is too weak. If you go up and fight a little more seriously, you'll be able to win in such a short time. When he said this, the youth completely forgot that when the person played the game, one hand was obviously assisting. In other words, this wasn't Qin Mo's true ability. After the match, the person on the other team took off his headphones and was very dejected. He thought about it and said, Almighty Qin, can you give it your all in the next match? Qin Mo paused. All right. Just one word. He had to admit that he hadn't used his full strength just now. Actually, Almighty Qin, at this time, you can be a little more sophisticated, like praising me. He admitted it so straightforwardly, but his fans are watching from the side. Qin Mo glanced at him. You are good at sneak attacks, just be careful not to get killed. That person. Chapter 743. The screen was still replaying the match. The 2v2 team had already stepped forward. Yinhu and Lin Feng. The Yin and Feng couple. The most compatible duo. The opposing team saw the name list. They stood up immediately. Don't bully them just because they are nerds. How dare they say they aren't here for revenge? From the 1v1 to the 2v2, they were using their strongest lineup. What exactly were they trying to do? Actually, Supreme Alliance wasn't planning on doing anything. They were just considering the competition rules. The revival match was different from the National League, because it was a round robin. Hence, if they won the 1v1 and 2v2, they wouldn't have to fight the 5v5. This would reduce the pressure on the team members and save time. In the end, there was only one sentence: don't talk, just do it. The opposing team hated their bad luck for being matched against Supreme Alliance at the start of the revival match. Their captain was an old member of the circle. Before the competition started, he sent a message to the Alliance's group chat. Zi Xiaopao. Supreme Alliance, don't you dare to go easy on us. That was what Zi Xiaopao meant. Even if they couldn't beat Supreme Alliance in the competition, they had to win in a verbal battle. Zhao Samping liked to join in the fun. The battle is starting. Old Zi, I bet no one from Supreme Alliance will reply to your message. Lin Chintao replied directly. 200. 300. The lazy voice of a goddess replied. Boju lifted her lips. She sent a video over and typed a few words. Godzi, you're being too polite. We've always been giving in. There's no need to talk about whether we dare or not. Zi Xiaopao. Zhao Sampang. F*CK little spade, how can you be so heartless? 100 almighty fatty, I'm fine with either a red packet or a bank transfer. This time it was a voice message. Zhao Samping was defeated and could only give away his money. This had always been a joy in the Alliance's group chat. Zi Xiaopao. Honestly, how strong is Qin Mo? He didn't even use his full strength today. That will have to wait until he meets me. Zhao Samping let out a long sigh. I understand. He's always looking forward to having an opponent like me. After all, we're mortal enemies. He can't beat me in terms of looks alone. Zi Zhanpao grabbed his hair. He must be crazy to come to the Alliance chat. But to be able to fight against such a strong Supreme Alliance. In fact, he was very happy. It was also a good opportunity to let those people under him know that there was always someone better than you out there. Unsurprisingly, they lost the 2v2. Everyone in the team was a little crestfallen. Zi Zhanpao patted one of the members' shoulders. If we can't do it this year, let's try again next year. Hearing this, the team members' eyes lit up. Yes. He was not afraid of losing. He was afraid that he would be blamed if he lost. However, in a good team, there was no such thing as complaining. Supreme Alliance won this round quickly. It was almost like this kind of aura. He won all 3 matches in a row. One could imagine how excited the fans were. It would have been a happy thing. But there was just one thing that seemed to be wrong. Lin Feng glanced over, watching as the youngster lowered her head to play with her phone. On the other side was their captain, who was drinking water. However, neither of them seemed to have taken the initiative to speak to the other, right? Was it an illusion? What was wrong with them? Chapter 744. Before Lin Feng could ask, Bojiu stood up. Bojiu had already stood up, her left hand pressing down on her slender neck, twisting it to the right. It's finally my turn. This person's personality was very compatible with her appearance in the battle uniform. The zipper was never willing to be zipped up properly. It was half opened, revealing the white t-shirt inside. Her entire body followed the youngster's movement, tall and slender. The key was that this wasn't a big deal. In an instant, it caused a commotion in the stadium. It wasn't because of anything else. It was because there was a line of small words written on the t-shirt. Supreme Alliance. Heitao. The back was written in pinyin. The font was beautiful black regular script. At the back of the black regular script, there was a green ribbon emblem. Everyone knew what the green ribbon emblem represented. This was a concept that the Spade fans had decided on when they first established the fan club. Fan club wasn't just for show. They tried their best to do positive things, But why did this t-shirt? The girls in the official fan club stood up. Before they screamed, they covered their mouths. That's our fan club's. Yes, that was the one-time fan club t-shirt that every Spade fan would wear. No one expected the youngster to wear it herself. If they weren't fans, they wouldn't understand how it felt. Besides, the youngster turned her face and smiled in their direction. Her eyes were bright, her teeth were white, and her eyes were deep, because she liked someone too much. Hence, it was really hard to forget how that person looked when he failed. In the same esports arena, not long ago, the youngster stood there, covered in wounds. She was splashed with coke, disgust, and despised. No matter how strong a person was, he would never let you see his wounds. When he came back again, there was a crisp sound of the keyboard. The moment the game's special effects started, the people saw the person on the screen sweeping towards the opponent like the wind. The assassin rushed out of the light, handsome and dazzling. The youngster sitting in front of the computer had an earphone cord around her neck. Her clean and fair side profile looked extremely handsome. Her pale thin lips were curved into a smile. Her pair of eyes seemed to be staring at the screen lazily. Her expression was calm and composed under the scattered light of the screen. Her eyelashes were dyed with arcs. Those arcs were very eye-catching, whether it was those who liked her or those who didn't. As an esports player, the hands on the keyboard were so fast that no one could see where they landed. One hand switched between the small picture and the big picture. When it was broadcasted on the big screen, it was a series of switching scenes. The shoutcaster was dumbfounded. So fast, how was he supposed to nag? Some people said that playing games depended on equipment and levels. There was no denying that it was like that sometimes. But sometimes, when you meet someone with heaven-defying hand speed, it doesn't matter how much attack power you have. Because that person ran away, you couldn't hit him at all. The cannon fire was clearly aimed at the figure flying towards him. But that person moved to the side. With a bayonet in hand, he allowed the flames to spread out behind him. He didn't even look back. Shwa. He raised his bayonet. Against the cold light. Close combat. No one could win against Spade Z's assassin. Skills were cast consecutively. Speed reduction, life steal, and then a heavy stab. KO. Beautiful. The commentator couldn't help but slam his fist on the table. The audience looked back at him with an expression that clearly said, "There's finally something slow for you to commentate on." Chapter 745. The baby-faced youth in the audience stood up uncontrollably. Even Watanabe's gaze deepened. Then he broke into a smile, turning towards the person beside him. No wonder Vice Captain is so concerned about Spade Z, so that's the reason. That move just now should be at an international level. Supreme Alliance is indeed a hidden talent. Initially, he had only come to take a breather. But now Watanabe felt the need to conduct a detailed technical analysis of Supreme Alliance. Is that him? The youth was still talking to himself. It was obvious that he was shocked by her actions. However, no one here felt it as deeply as Hoshino. The person sitting beside him wouldn't be able to tell that when he glanced at the youngster's hands, Hoshino had tightened his grip on the keyboard. He hung his head low, and his black hair fell on his face, forming a shadow. The corners of his mouth were curling up, until it rose to the warmest and most brilliant angle. There was no mistaking it. Only Z could do that kind of hand speed and penetration. Hoshino looked up again. No one could understand the sparks dancing in his eyes. As the word victory was used, the young man sitting in front of the computer took off the headphones on his head. His messy hair did not make him look out of place. Instead, it made him look handsome. However, no one knew why the youth paused. Bojo paused. That was because she always felt that someone was watching her. From this angle, he could see a dense crowd of spectators. Could it be an illusion? Captain, even if Little Spade's love for you is too obvious, you should hold it in. He's still young, right? Just treat it as another Chin fan. Your fans love you as their husband. Little Spade is just the closest to you. You should let him have it first and he listens to you. It's weird that you guys don't talk to each other. It would have been better if Lin Feng hadn't mentioned this. At the mention of this matter, Chin Mo, who was holding a bottle of mineral water, tilted his head and glanced at him. His gaze was extremely cold. "He listens to me?" The voice that came out from his thin lips was also cold, but there was another layer of indescribable coldness. "It would be great if he really listened to me." When Qin Mo turned his head to light his cigarette, Lin Feng could see the corner of his lips. It seemed like he was smiling, but it seemed more like he was pressing down. But no one saw it clearly because when Qin Mo smoked, his gaze became much colder. Lin Feng thought to himself, "Little spade. This is all I can help you with. You still have to rely on yourself for the rest." Unexpectedly, when the young man came back, he sat there and asked for a bottle of water. He didn't say anything. He only glanced over at them for a moment. Lin Feng shook his head, leaning over to say, "Little spade, you aren't yourself today. In the past, when Captain pulled you in public, you didn't resist. Also, when I told you that Captain kissed a girl, you weren't like this either. You must think back to that time and think back to now. Find a balance in your heart. Persevere and chase after him with all your might. Sometimes Captain isn't so hard-hearted." Chapter 746. Sure. Lin Feng felt that he could understand the feelings of someone who had a crush on someone else. "How about this? I'll put it another way. Is it your fault or his fault for what happened today?" Bojio took a moment. "It's mine." Wearing female clothing had the opposite effect. Lin Feng looked as though he had seen a ghost. "What did you do to Captain again? Did you try to rape Captain when you were in the same room as him during the variety show but he rejected you? Is that why you two ended up like this?" Every word from Lin Feng seemed to strike at the memories she didn't want to recall. Just like that night on the variety show. She didn't want to think about it. The moment she thought about it, her mind was filled with the Almighty's breathing. She remembered how the Almighty had held her hand and moved her lower body. That burning gaze and panting breath. It seemed to burn her ears even now, especially when the Almighty had said, "It's hard to not be tempted when you see me like this." He had taken the initiative to pull open his black uniform. When his white shirt was half open, his abs could be faintly seen. Those unforgettable smooth lines also appeared at this moment. Her canine pet. It was mesmerizing. It was a pity she couldn't bring him home like when she was young. That was it. She couldn't go any further. It wasn't suitable for her, or the Almighty, to go any further. It wasn't suitable for her to have friends. She had encountered far more darkness than light in her life. There were many people with ulterior motives. In this circle, no one could comfort you when you were hurt. They all wanted you to fall. The remaining ones with a conscience won't refuse to help you. But they will also cut off contact with you at the same time. When you were famous, they would appear and call you brother. Bojio had seen her fair share of such people. Not to mention those beasts in human clothing that she had sent to prison. Only that person. The pet she had wanted since she was young. Even though she knew it wasn't suitable for them to be friends. She wanted to hold on to something. Bojio lowered her eyes. The moment she did so, a bottle of eye drops appeared in front of her. She couldn't be wrong about those familiar long fingers. Her body trembled. Other than the bitterness in her chest, there was a warmth she had never felt before. At this moment, Bojio was filled with regret. If only he knew that he wouldn't have the chance to do anything to the Almighty after he grew up. She should have pounced on the Almighty more often when she was younger. He took the eye drops. "I don't know what to say." He still didn't break the silence. Lin Feng rejoiced at the fact that he had competed very quickly in these 5 matches. Especially when it was a 1v1, it was either the captain or Little Spade. He didn't know what was going on with the two of them, but they were killing their way through. Even the fans felt that their idol's hands were unusually good today. Lin Feng's heart was about to explode as he watched from the side. How was this a good hand feel? It was obvious that the two of them were in a bad mood because of the Cold War, and decided to kill each other in the game. Therefore, on the first day of the revival match, the stamina-exhausting wheel race that everyone had imagined did not arrive. The 5 matches ended quickly, and the winner was Supreme Alliance. When it was time for the shoutcaster to conclude his speech, the shoutcaster scratched his head and forced a smile. MMH Supreme Alliance, their speed is amazing. As for the rest, please watch the replay. Yes, watch the replay. Next time, he would never come to such an occasion to commentate again. Chapter 747. Of course, there was a replay. But no one had expected it. Even with Spade Z's presence. The MVP of the entire match was still Qin Mo. But it wasn't strange since there was a 2v2 match. Almighty Qin had Baby Feng watch from the side while he challenged the opponent 3 times. Actually, Baby Feng didn't want to watch, but he couldn't keep up with his captain's speed, so he pushed the tower over. In the end, he took down the city. This way, Qin Mo's kill count was higher than Spade Z's. Of course, that wasn't the only way to evaluate the MVP. There were other contributions. The audience noticed it too. Even though the kill count was the same, the two of them were different in other aspects. When Almighty Qin was killing, he had pushed down 1 or 2 defense towers. His output was different. Looking at the string of numbers, even for the players of the pro teams, the only thought that flashed through their minds was admiration. But there was one person who wasn't. He was sitting among the audience, but unlike when he was on a variety show, he wasn't wearing his uniform this time. Instead, he wore a pair of gold-rimmed spectacles and a black mask. The esports industry is really different now, huh? He laughed softly. His words were overheard by the person sitting beside him. Why? Still nostalgic? Even though he was here to watch esports, he was holding on to a book that only a criminal psychologist would read. His long black hair brushed past his fingernails that were dyed red. The light blocked his face, making it hard to see his features. Rao Rong pushed his spectacles up, the lenses reflecting the light. How could that be? You don't know why I'm back? It's all for revenge. Of course I know, but I'm not interested in such a competition. He closed the book. Why does he like to play such a game that doesn't match his identity? He should have come out earlier to play, don't you think? Rao Rong tilted his head. According to his personality, he should have forgotten about you long ago. No, you don't understand him as well as I do, or rather, no one understands him as well as I do. He cupped his face with both hands, his eyes smiling, but it made one feel uncomfortable. There was a sweet aura around him. Rao Rong didn't say anything else. Because there was a point. He couldn't say it out loud, but he had to admit it. When he saw Qin Mo controlling the character to lower his stance and sweep, his bloodline stirred. However, it was only for a moment before it disappeared. Esports. His blood was boiling. He was just an existence that would abandon his teammates once they were no longer useful to him. Rao Rong looked at his hands, the light blurring his expression. According to convention, one of the winning team's captain or vice-captain had to be interviewed. It was impossible for Almighty Qin to accept an interview. The media went straight for Bojio, the long-legged youngster. The host led Bojio to a quieter place. On the other side, the members of the battle team began to officially leave the stage. But at this moment, on the leftmost side of the audience, one of the male fans suddenly shouted in excitement, "Watanabe, great God?" Watanabe, who was about to leave with his hat on, cursed in his heart. Their first reaction was to look at their vice-captain. Chapter 748. F***CK. Where did Vice-Captain go at such a critical moment? The youth was also stunned. He quickly glanced over, gesturing for Watanabe to head towards the left exit. This was also why he had chosen to sit here. It was the closest to the exit, which was the best guarantee for them. Although the youth was also a member of the Japanese, he wasn't as recognizable as Watanabe and Hoshino. He raised the popcorn in his hand, blocking his fans. Watanabe took the opportunity to press his cap down, and dashed over. He had used the fastest moves in his life to hide from his fans. Thinking about it, it was really sad. Moreover, he hadn't expected his knee to hurt so much when he knocked into the chair. Hiss! Watanabe inhaled sharply, hugging his leg as he ran forward. He didn't seem like his usual playboy self. But when he reached the exit, he saw a figure at the end. "Vice-Captain, why are you going there? That's the interview room, not the exit." Watanabe thought that the person in front would turn back after he shouted. Unexpectedly, that person did not slow down at all. Instead, he completely disappeared around the corner. Watanabe gritted his teeth and looked at the baby-faced man behind him who had been squeezed out of shape. He didn't care so much anymore. Anyway, the vice-captain's Chinese was good, and he wouldn't get lost here. At most, he could just ask his agent to come and get him. He couldn't hold on any longer. He had to retreat. Watanabe's name caused a huge reaction. Even the female fans didn't know, looking at each other in confusion. But the male fans and the professional teams knew. Watanabe. The Japanese are here? How is that possible? It's just a revival match. Why would they come? If Xiangnan were here, they could come and watch the match, but this situation. What do you mean by this situation? Are we that bad? We'll talk about that later. Are the Japanese really here? The officials were alarmed. The shoutcasters were already in a daze, and now they were even more confused. Who could tell them what was going on? The media couldn't let this opportunity slip by. All of their cameras were aimed at one spot. Some people had already run out from the other exit in order to block the exit. One could imagine how chaotic the scene was. At a time like this, the only ones who didn't change were the Supreme Alliance. Lin Feng's arm was still on Yin Hu's shoulder. He had no intention of letting go. Originally, he was talking to his best friend about Little Spade and their captain. When he heard the explosion, he frowned. Watanabe. The Japanese main force? Looks like it. Yin Hu's gaze landed on the man's chin. He had just drunk some water, and when the water droplets flowed down his chin and condensed into water droplets, he really wanted to kiss him. Lin Feng was a naive person. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't notice it. It was the same this time. What do you think they're here for? Are you here to seek revenge from Little Spade? For what happened on the Japanese server? Not really. Yin Hu furrowed his brows. A certain someone was too close to him, her breath hitting his neck. It wasn't easy for him to tolerate it. Lin Feng was still talking to himself. Qin Mo, who was walking at the front, paused absent-mindedly. Lin Feng almost knocked into someone. If Yin Hu hadn't stopped him in time, Lin Feng would have crashed into him. Captain? Lin Feng didn't think he was in any danger. He wasn't Little Spade, and if he had really bumped into Captain, with his mysophobia, he would definitely have increased his training. Qin Mo turned back, his face handsome, his voice calm. You guys leave first. Lin Feng watched as his captain turned around and walked to the other side of the venue after saying that. What was going on? In the audience, Rao Rong tilted his head and asked the person beside him, Is it time for us to leave? That person smiled and stood up. When he blended into the noisy crowd, his eyes were dark. In the entire venue, the quietest place was the interview room at the end of the safety tunnel. The MC was passionate, but it was a pity that the interview was only a few words long. It was a pity that he couldn't chat with the youngster for much longer. Bojo ended the interview. That's basically it. Thank you, Big Spade, for accepting our interview. Just like all the fans, I'm looking forward to your performance in the National League. The MC kept the microphone. Bojo chuckled, stuffing one hand into her pocket while the other was putting on her white earpiece. Both the MC and the cameraman froze on the spot. They looked towards the entrance, their eyes widening in disbelief. It wasn't because of him, it was because of the figure walking over from the other side. Since she was an MC in the esports industry, she had a strong understanding of the almighties in the game. She had applied for 5 interviews with the person in front of her, but the only answer she had gotten was sorry. Now that she had finally seen him in person, her emotions were unimaginable. Hoshino, international esports player, the most valuable player of the year, the top player in the world. He had the speed of a gentle knife. These were all words used to describe him. But when she saw him in person, that was when the MC realized why people didn't compliment his skills while praising his looks. He was too handsome, so handsome that she didn't know how to look into his eyes. But right now, there was a question in everyone's mind. That was the famous almighty Hoshino. Why was he here? The MC was undoubtedly excited. She felt that this was a rare opportunity. She picked up the microphone and wanted to interview him. On the other hand, after Hoshino entered, he didn't look anywhere but at the youngster's face. His gaze was deep and unwavering, as though they were familiar with each other. I know it's you. Bojo hadn't expected to see Hoshino here. When she received his gaze, she was startled. Her gaze flickered. Then her lips curled upwards, not avoiding him at all. It was a silent acknowledgement. It was a tacit understanding between them. This wasn't a good place to reminisce. There were people around. In reality, according to Hoshino's usual style, he wouldn't have approached the youngster directly. He didn't care about anything. But this time it was different. He was really afraid that that person would give him a negative answer. Because he was most afraid that there would be no traces of that person in this world. Almighty Hoshino, let's have a chat? When Bojo said these words, she had already taken a step towards him. Her lips lifted and her brows raised. That was the person in Hoshino's memory, even though the hair color and age didn't match. But everything was right. When she asked this question, the youngster didn't forget to send him another message. Pay attention to the left and right. That was when he had helped Z cover up. Both of them would give each other hints with their eyes at the ball or on the streets. This time wasn't an exception. Hoshino nodded slightly. The two of them walked in tandem. Just as the crowd was still in shock over their relationship, Bojo brushed past them and took the magnetic card from the host's pocket. It was used to unlock the door. After she and Hoshino left the interview room, she reached out with her left hand and pressed it against the sensor. When the door closed, the MC and the cameraman snapped out of their shock. Their first reaction was to follow them and film. But when they pushed the door open, they realized it was locked. Why was it locked? Electromagnetic card. The cameraman reminded the MC. The MC reached for her pocket and realized it was empty. The cameraman watched as she searched through her pocket and frowned. What's wrong? My card is missing. From the MC's expression, she hadn't noticed anything when Bojo brushed past him. The corridor wasn't a good place to talk. But at least it was better than the interview room. They stood facing each other. The sunlight shone through the windows. Everyone walked to the other side, because of Watanabe. No one would come to the interview room. Hoshino glanced down at the person in front of him. Bojo smiled lightly, and was about to say something. She had already been pulled into an embrace. The voice was clear, warm and soft. It was so soft that only the two of them could hear it. Long time no see, Z. It was a hug from a good friend. Bojo could clearly hear the emotions in his voice. She couldn't help reaching out and pressing her hand on Hoshino's back. She didn't say a word. Both of them seemed to need to use this kind of method to celebrate their long-awaited reunion. However, in the eyes of others, such a scene was not the case. It was a hug as though there was no one else around. It was a look of telepathy. It was a closeness without any ill feelings. This made Chin Emo stop in his tracks. If there was anyone following behind him, they would be able to feel the coldness emanating from his back. No one dared to move. Amidst the interweaving lights, Chin Emo stood there with his back straight. His posture was so casual that it could be used as a poster. His deep eyes were clouded by a thin layer of gray mist because of the scene in front of him. There had been signs before. The earliest was on the streets of Tokyo. After seeing the advertisement that Hoshino had filmed, that person's emotions had clearly fluctuated. He had gotten someone to investigate. But there hadn't been any actual interaction between the two of them. What kind of existence was Hoshino to a certain someone? Now he knew. That person wasn't gay. But the person wasn't him. Chin Mo's gaze was cold as he flicked the cigarette between his fingers. The floor-to-ceiling windows behind him moved, making him look like a devil that could summon a group of demons. He was elegant and cold. There wasn't a single bit of humanity in him. The sharp Bojo could sense his aura. The moment she glanced up, she saw someone watching her from afar. That person held a cigarette in his hand, his slender fingers emitting a faint light. He stood there with a noble posture. For the first time, there was no smile on his face, only indifference. Even his eyes did not reflect anyone's shadow. His eyebrows were thick, his nose was high, and it was hard to get close to him. The Almighty. Before Bojio could take a closer look, Chinemo had already turned around. Chinemo had already turned around and was striding forward. The unapproachable aura behind him spread out in an instant. It was indescribably cold. Bojio stilled. Did the Almighty see everything? Hoshino sensed the pause in the person in his arms. He turned and looked in the direction she was looking at. There was nothing. Was there someone? Hoshino asked. Bojio nodded slowly. Based on the scene just now, the Almighty must have misunderstood her relationship with Hoshino. Could she use this opportunity to get rid of the Almighty's feelings for her? That was good too. Bojio lowered her lids, clenching her fists. This kind of misunderstanding was better than the Almighty finding out her identity and thinking that it was all a lie from start to finish. It was only a matter of time before she crossed swords with the Almighty. She was the most sinful person on his list. He was the criminal psychologist she needed to be wary of. They weren't supposed to have any interactions. It was just that it was too comfortable to be by that person's side, so it lost its original sense of danger. After all, no one would protect her like a brother. She had never seen Z with such an expression. Although the corners of his mouth were smiling, his eyes were filled with unknown emotions. Was it because of the person who had just appeared? Hoshino glanced in that direction again before retracting his gaze. His gaze landed on Bojio's face. He spoke in a voice that only the two of them could hear. This isn't a disguise? Finally, the question had come. Bojio didn't know how to explain it to anyone. No one would believe her even if she said it. Even she wasn't a believer. How could he believe in the resurrection of the dead? But that was indeed the case. This isn't a disguise. She lowered her voice, listening to the footsteps that could no longer be heard. Her eyes shifted. Hoshino frowned. If it isn't a disguise, what is it? You look young, a high school student? How did you look 5 years ago? How did this happen? Bojio knew that no one would come near them. After the Almighty left, there wouldn't be any reason for him to return. As long as she lowered her voice, no one would be able to hear her. She reached out and pressed against the wall behind Hoshino, lowering her gaze. On the surface, it seemed like she was closing the distance between them, but in reality, it was 100% safer position. Because this isn't my body. Bojio's tone was heavy, every word pressing against Hoshino's heart. Hoshino, I died and came back to life. When I woke up, I was in this person's body. I was reborn. Chapter 749. Dead and alive again? Reborn? Hoshino released the youngster, his gaze still wavering. So you are now someone else's body. Bojio glanced out of the window, her side profile handsome but confused. I don't know what I am now either. Boom. Lightning flashed outside the arena. The light from the collision shone on the youngster's face. She was standing in the darkest corner, but she stuffed a hand into her pocket, her smile never fading. Do you need me to prove my identity? No need. Hoshino looked at the person in front of him and digested the information he had received. Gradually, his gaze became gentle again, but there was something else more than that gentleness. Dead and alive, what did that mean? More importantly, what did it mean to be dead? Hoshino clenched his fists. He couldn't imagine a world where humans no longer existed. Don't look at me like that. Bojio took another step forward, her brows arched. The new identity isn't bad, it's a perfect disguise. I haven't been a high school student for years. Hoshino finally had the mood to look at the youngster's attire. Wait a minute. This body is a boy? Bojio lifted her lips lazily. Age is too confusing. It's a pity the body is still female. But not many people know that the original owner has something to hide. Why are you so restless everywhere you go? It was obvious that Hoshino had fully recovered. He was even glad that he could still see this person. Bojio smiled. I want to know the answer to that question too. I'm already in this state. How can I still be restless? You're talking about Z? The two of them were worthy of being partners in action. The moment Bojio opened her mouth, the intelligent Hoshino knew what she was talking about. It seems like you're investigating? Even though the location wasn't the best, the most important thing was to convey the message to each other. Hoshino's eyes darkened. At first, I thought he was you. Then, a forum appeared, and you sent me an email. I rejected that idea, but it was too late by the time I realized it. There was no way to lock onto his IP, and other than imitating you, I couldn't find any trace of him. How come there are no traces? Bojio glanced sideways at the door that was about to be unlocked. Once again, she sighed. This wasn't a good place to talk. Imitating me is a trail. Hoshino, do you remember what I told you before? A criminal's trail is always left on his every crime. Who is the first victim on the forum? Where is she? Perhaps some people would say that the further the better. The culprit is definitely not in the province or the city, but you and I both know that this is not an ordinary instigation. He chose a person to be the maiden's sacrifice, and it was not a random choice. I have a feeling that the person who impersonated me is in Jiangcheng. If we find out why he impersonated me, we will be able to find the most important clue. Bojio remembered that she was still under the Almighty's tender care. When she heard the door open, she glanced up. It's not convenient for me to make a move now. You can investigate. Go straight and turn left, you can avoid the fans. Hoshino looked at the young man blocking his way, and knew very well that this was the end of the conversation. The two of them really had a tacit understanding. Chapter 750. The host and cameraman walked out together, their hair a mess. They glanced back and forth, but couldn't find Almighty Hoshino anywhere. But Big Spade was still standing in front of them, smiling naturally, revealing her two cute canines. Regarding the interview just now, I have a question that I didn't answer seriously. Now that I have time, I can answer both of you. Hoshino was the most important question at this moment. But they were the ones who invited Big Spade. How could they reject him? It's a pity that both of you are in a hurry. The youngster lifted her wrist, glancing down at her watch before placing it down again. She was counting in her heart until she reached 100. Bojio turned and smiled lightly. Go ahead. This pause was enough for Hoshino to sneak into the crowd. The host and cameraman were extremely grateful for the youngster's understanding. They even forgot to ask, you came out with Almighty Hoshino just now, do you know him? Only when they ran out did they realize something was amiss. When they stopped and turned back, there was no longer anyone there. They weren't sure. A brilliant magician would always use other things to divert attention. And that was the method Bojio used. There was a reason the police hadn't been able to catch Z all these years. She wasn't just an expert hacker, she was also extremely cunning. Z had disguised herself in many different professions. Nightclub singers, bartenders, magicians, and even restaurant staff. Hence, Bojio wasn't worried about escaping in front of them. The youngster leaned against the wall. When she glanced over, her lips curved. If Hoshino had seen that smile, he would have been even more certain that it was Z, the true Z. Outside the arena, the first rain of the year finally came after the thunder. With a bone-chilling coldness, the droplets fell on Qin Mo's face. However, there was a type of person with such an aura. Even when he walked in the rain, he exuded a nonchalant elegance. But the aura he exuded was too cold. It was so cold that ever since Qin Mo had entered the crime squad, Deputy Zhang, who had been by his side, didn't dare to get close to him. But he couldn't let his young master get drenched in the rain. Qin Mo was born into a military family, and used the best of everything. Not only was she doted on by her parents, but she was also doted on by her rich grandfather. When he was young, he was like a prince, untainted by dust. Not to mention now, as soon as he stepped out, bodyguards had already greeted him with black umbrellas. But the young master did not allow them to follow. They didn't dare to follow. Assistant Zhang had no choice but to head out personally. Young master, Supreme Alliance's car is in the west. Qin Mo didn't speak. His eyelashes were dripping with raindrops. His pure black uniform was dripping with raindrops, making him look like a noble devil. However, this time his eyes were no longer filled with indifference. Even Adjutant Zhang didn't know what it was. Because in the next second, Qin Mo walked towards the commercial car. Lin Feng was sitting on the far left. When he saw this scene, he immediately opened the door and jumped out. This was also one that didn't need an umbrella. Yinhu frowned. He unzipped his uniform and with a twist of his wrist, he covered him from head to toe before alighting the car. Chapter 751. When Lin Feng ran to Qin Mo's side, he was still looking behind him. He scratched his head in confusion. Captain, where's Little Spade? Just now, Lin Hu had told him that Captain had asked them to leave first because he wanted to look for Little Spade. Since that was the case, shouldn't they have reconciled? Why did Captain come out alone? Who knew that after hearing his words, the Captain would stop what he was doing and turn around to look at him with a coldness that had never been seen before? Lin Feng stilled, thinking that it couldn't be, they hadn't reconciled yet. That Captain, I know that sometimes Little Spade's way of expressing his feelings is too direct and you definitely can't take it. It's reasonable for you to reject him, but the atmosphere between you two is really affecting other people's relationships. For example, I'm completely hopeless about relationships. When Yinhu heard this, he turned to look at him. The other couple was at odds with each other. Why was this guy so desperate? Really, it's fine to reject him. Lin Feng sighed. But Captain, don't be angry at Little Spade. Even if he slept with you, you have to forgive him. He didn't hold back and Captain definitely wouldn't let him take advantage of you. When Little Spade comes out, hit him a few times to appease your anger. He won't feel good after being rejected by you. The water droplets splashed onto Qin Mo's elegant face. Even his black hair was pressed down, making it hard for others to see his expression at this moment. But Lin Feng wasn't sure if his Captain was really angered by Little Spade, because his back stiffened. He wanted to say something more. A slow and low voice sounded in her ears, as if wet in the rain. I'm the one who was rejected. Whoosh. Lin Feng and Yinhu looked up at Qin Mo at the same time. That person stood there with his back straight. If one looked closely, they would notice that his uniform, which was known as the most handsome in the esports arena, was completely drenched. The ends of his black hair were dripping with water. His fingertips, which had never been stained with a speck of dust, had been cut by something, and blood was flowing out. Lin Feng had never seen his Captain like this before. His black hair blocked his eyes, and he could only vaguely hear him repeating that sentence. I'm always the one who gets rejected. Lin Feng's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. After all, everyone knew that Spadesy had joined Supreme Alliance for a reason, and that reason was their Captain. And before Little Spade came in, he had already confessed to his Captain. No matter how he looked at it, Little Spade should be the one chasing him. He tilted his head to look at Yinhu beside him. Yinhu's expression was very serious. It was obvious that Yinhu's acceptance was much stronger than his. In fact, he seemed to have already known about the clues in this matter. Lin Feng thought about it and still couldn't accept it. He needed to calm down. Most importantly, how could Captain be gay? You must be joking. What did it mean to be rejected? The way Little Spade looked at Captain, it was as if he wanted to take him home and raise him. Why would he reject Captain? Chapter 752. Lin Feng really couldn't accept such a setting in such a short time. He felt that there must be a misunderstanding between the two of them, but his mind was in a daze. Who could tell him why his Captain suddenly changed his taste and fell in love with a handsome young man like Little Spade? What about the girl that his Captain had kissed? Why do I always feel that everything is weird? But even so, Lin Feng didn't say anything after they boarded the car. That was probably how teammates were. They could sit together and chat, but when it came to something deep in their hearts, they wouldn't say anything. Lin Feng glanced at Qin Mo, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. He was still wet and had no intention of wiping away the traces. His eyes were closed as though he was resting, but when the water droplets slid down his handsome face, it didn't seem like he was resting. On the contrary, the entire commercial car seemed to have fallen into an ice cellar. Coco hugged his bunny, pinching its ears before moving towards Baby Feng. Just as he was about to speak, he realized that the person he found wasn't that strong. He moved to the left, to Yin Wuyao's side. Baby Feng looked at him in confusion. Coco gave him a look that said, You don't understand. Captain was about to activate his freezing technique. Baby Feng used his gaze to ask, "What does that have to do with you moving closer to me and suddenly moving away from me? I have to find someone who can protect me. I should be the one protecting you." The two of them communicated with their eyes and could actually understand each other. Baby Feng immediately became excited. He pulled her to his side. "Who said I can't protect you?" In Wuyao watched as the two children touched each other. He wanted to go down for a smoke since the atmosphere in the car was a little. What was wrong with the captain and little captain? As expected of an older person, they understood the situation. But it was useless. The driver bit the bullet and started the car. The person beside him reached out and pressed on the steering wheel. Qin Mo's fingers were indeed beautiful, long and clean even though they were wet. "Wait for him." 2 words. He didn't say who he was waiting for, but everyone in the car knew that he was talking about Bojio. At that moment, the man's pale fingers were almost transparent. Lin Feng finally believed what he had just said. Because at this moment, he was still thinking about the person he was waiting for. Captain against Little Spade. It really wasn't as simple as liking him. It was a pity that Bojio didn't know someone was waiting for her at the main building. In addition, it would take some time to avoid the fans and the media. Moreover, the road leading to the entrance of the main building had already been taken by the fans. It was obviously unwise to go out now. On the other side, Hoshino, who had walked along the road, passed through the drizzle, held the railing with one hand, and jumped to the other side of the road. The venue was located in a bustling area, so it was not difficult to get a taxi. In addition, it was in this direction. Even though it was raining on the opposite side, many people were taking taxis. On this side, no one fought with Hoshino. The first thing Hoshino did after getting on the taxi was to call his 2 teammates. "Where are you?" Chapter 753. Watanabe's situation wasn't looking good, especially when he turned around and saw the media chasing him. He ran even faster. It was raining outside, and he would slip from time to time. If the fans chased after him and something happened, it would be even worse. That was why Watanabe urged Hoshino to hurry over. He really couldn't hold on much longer, but if he stopped, he would face more trouble. First of all, he didn't have a manager or bodyguard. He would really be torn apart by the passion of the fans. Hoshino glanced over and glanced at the scene through the railings. He didn't put down the phone in his hand. His voice had a calming effect. "From now on, run towards the main road. The faster, the better." "Vice Captain, are you serious? You want me to go that way? There are the most fans there." Although Watanabe said that, his body had already started moving. He made a turn and successfully got rid of the fans behind him. Without his hat, he could only hope that the people behind him would stop chasing him. Hoshino raised his hand and glanced at the time. Then his voice rang out again. "Run faster." Watanabe was definitely listening to his vice captain. He was counting on him to bail him out. "I'll count to 7. Run to this side of the road. There will be a car waiting for you," Hoshino said as he pressed down the window. Then he turned to the driver. "Sir, please stop the car and turn on the flashing lights." "Okay." The driver lived in Jiang City and had experienced many things. There were many celebrities who held concerts in Jiang City, but even so, his passengers were ordinary people who came to watch the concert. It was the first time a celebrity sat in his car. That person should be a celebrity. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people chasing after him. 3 to 1. As Hoshino's voice fell, he reached out to open the door on his left. Seeing that, Watanabe immediately jumped in and slammed the door behind him. He panted. Almost, I can't make it. Sir, drive." Hoshino didn't speak to him immediately. Instead, he asked the driver to start the car. The fans who didn't catch up to him stood by the side of the road, shouting Watanabe's name. This scene was not difficult to see, especially the Supreme Alliance members who had parked the commercial car at the main building. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows. The Japanese team really had a close call this time. Without a manager or any official notice, he dared to appear in the audience. He was quite a character. However, Is the person in the car helping him? Looks like the Japanese aren't the only ones here. Lin Feng's words did make sense. But other than Chin Emo, no one knew who was in the car to receive Watanabe. When the cars brushed past each other on the other side of the road, the car window was open, so people could clearly see the person sitting inside. He was handsome and had a gentle temperament. In the esports circle, almost everyone knew him. He probably noticed our gazes. Especially at this time, the MPV parked here usually belonged to the team. That person turned his head to the side, and his voice and appearance were all revealed to everyone. Even though it was only for a moment. Hoshino. Everyone knew that Hoshino was Coco's favorite esports almighty. Now that he had seen him in person, even though it was just a short scene, his emotions were stirred. Hoshino is here too. Coco couldn't believe it, his eyes lingering in the direction where the taxi had disappeared. Shui Yaoyao didn't know much about the esports circle, so she couldn't understand Coco's emotions. She probed, "Is Hoshino strong?" "He isn't just strong, he is insane. My almighty is especially handsome when he is gaming." Coco couldn't stop talking about his former idol. "This is strange. I remember he never watches competitions. Besides, he would use any time he has to sleep. Why is he watching this revival match?" Even if the Japanese wanted to visit Big Spade due to the incident on the Japanese server, he wouldn't have to show up. This is strange. This is really strange. Listening to these words, Chin Mo's eyes remained closed the entire time. His entire being gave off an icy aura. The water droplets were gone, but there was still a faint dampness on his chiseled face. His hair didn't seem to dry easily. Lin Feng glanced at his captain before turning to the exit. There was still no one. There wasn't a reply to his voice message either. After about 30 minutes, Chin Emo spoke faintly, "Let's go." It was another 2 words, but the temperature in his voice was completely different. It was another 2 words, but the temperature inside was suddenly different. Lin Feng was worried. He glanced at his phone, but there was still no reply. Lin Feng was a little worried about this. He looked at his phone again, but there was still no reply. What exactly was Little Spade doing? Bojo was indeed busy. And this favor was completely unexpected. She had turned a corner to avoid the fans, but she hadn't expected to bump into the captain of Lin Chintao's team. Bojo retracted her body instinctively, pressing her back against the wall. She tilted her handsome face slightly, watching as he spoke to a girl before walking in another direction. Bojo chose to follow him. She couldn't help but be concerned about his actions during the show. Bojo had switched her phone to silent mode when she had noticed him. Unexpectedly, she didn't discover anything else after following him for the entire journey. But there was one thing she was sure of. He wasn't just highly vigilant, he was also good at hiding. Moreover, he had done all of these things subconsciously. In her previous life, Bojo had played many cat and mouse games with the police. Her greatest advantage was her anti-surveillance ability, which meant that Rao Rong had the same ability. Bojo had noticed it the previous time in Lin City. After following him for the entire journey, Bojo was almost certain that he was doing it subconsciously. Bojo narrowed her eyes. This wasn't something a player who had just returned to the esports scene should have. Unless he wasn't as simple as the Almighty. Bojo watched as he waved for a taxi. It was difficult for her to follow him because she couldn't catch up in time. But that was enough. If she continued, she would be discovered and it would be counterproductive. Bojo started to think about the girl he had met previously. She had only asked for directions. Since that was the case, why was he so guarded against her? The rain was getting heavier. She didn't have the time to think about such things. Since there wasn't a taxi, Bojo turned and pulled out her mask. She wore her uniform inside out and followed the few people into the subway station. After being drenched in the rain, it was really cold. Especially at this time of the year, it was easy to feel cold. After Bojo bought the card, she had just warmed up when she stuffed her left hand into her pocket when she saw 3 missed calls. It was Lin Feng. Bojo sent him a message when she was going through the security check. 10 minutes later, she received a reply. Lin Feng called Qin Haodong. Hello. It wasn't easy to find a seat in the subway, but she didn't intend to sit since she was still dripping water. Lin Feng sighed. Little Spade, you finally picked up the call. What did you do just now? You didn't pick up my calls, and we waited for you at the main building for more than half an hour. Bojiu paused when she heard that they had waited for her. I thought you guys would leave after the party. Originally, Captain asked us to wait. With that, Lin Feng paused. He didn't tell Little Spade everything that Qin Mo had told him. Bojiu froze when she heard the answer. Her grip on the ring tightened. Some things didn't need to be discussed further. She knew what he wanted to express. Bojiu recalled his back view and clenched her fists. She seemed to be enduring something. In the end, she didn't open the page to send a certain message. She didn't send a message, but that didn't mean others wouldn't. Qin Mo hadn't returned home. Just then, Director Huang called, his tone stern. Hurry over to my place. That's right, there is something you need to take a look at. No one here can solve it. It wasn't a bad call for Qin Mo. He needed something to do to divert his attention. The atmosphere in the crime squad was obviously different. From left to right, everyone had a solemn expression. Director Huang personally brought him into an isolation interrogation room. Do you see the person inside? Director Huang pointed at the glass. Qin Mo's side profile was pale, almost translucent and handsome. He seemed to be hinting for him to continue. Director Huang sensed something amiss with Qin Mo, but he couldn't be bothered with it right now. This man has somehow been infected with AIDS. Director Huang glanced at Qin Mo. Right now, she still feels like she wants to take revenge, but she can't get anything useful out of her. Instead, it's getting harder to control herself. You and I are both aware that AIDS can't be contracted out of nowhere, but I've checked her social circle. It's pretty clean. Qin Mo glanced at the fashionably dressed girl sitting inside. His gaze swept over the Gucci bracelet on her wrist, and the entire set of Swarovski jewelry, then her shoes. What's her family background like? It's alright, it's pretty ordinary. Director Huang looked into his gaze. You've noticed that too, right? That's right. She likes to buy light and luxurious items, but I've done some research and she doesn't have a bad job. Even though it's tough for her to buy these items, she still buys them for work. It's just that she has to eat buns and drink cold water for an entire month after buying one item. It's normal for girls to be like this. Qin Mo glanced up. Her social circle is simple, her occupation is clean, she doesn't have a history of blood donation, and there aren't any infected people around her. Have you checked her social circle app? His words were like a bolt of lightning that jolted Director Huang back to his senses. Director Huang turned his head, instructing his subordinates to get to work. In reality, the crime squad was usually very smart. But it wasn't something that they wouldn't have thought of. There wasn't a problem with QQ. There wasn't a problem with WeChat either. That left other social circle apps. In reality, Qin Mo suspected that the victim wasn't telling the truth. Ever since he had entered, that person had glanced over more than once. Her actions were extremely irritated. Other than uneasiness, there was also irritation and a vanity that could not be changed. Qin Mo could almost imagine what kind of person she was. She wasn't worth saving. If it had been him, he wouldn't have chosen to save her. But the life and death of some people shouldn't be decided by anyone. Director Huang had been ordering his subordinates to do this and that, but when he turned back, he saw Qin Mo's pale face. Even the color of his lips had changed, causing him to jump in fright. What happened? F***CK. Someone come quickly. Qin Mo leaned against the wall, holding his forehead with one hand. His voice was steely. Get Deputy Zhang up. Director Huang had never been ordered around by anyone. Of course, that didn't include Qin Mo. Deputy Zhang's expression changed when he saw his young master's state. That was when he remembered that his young master hadn't changed out of his clothes after being drenched in the rain. In that case, even a body made of steel wouldn't be able to take it. Moreover, his young master had an old injury on his wrist. Deputy Zhang didn't say much, reaching out for Qin Mo's arm to drape over his shoulder. In reality, Qin Mo's pride didn't allow him to be in such a pathetic state. It was only after he got into the car that he truly lost all his strength. Even then, his gaze was deep as he looked at Director Huang, enunciating each word. Pry open her mouth and get her to speak the truth. This isn't as simple as it seems. Director Huang knew she was referring to the person locked inside. He nodded solemnly, reminding him to take care of himself. After that, Qin Mo couldn't feel anything other than his thirst and body heat. Even his breathing seemed to be boiling. Every inch he exhaled increased the heat. He placed his hand on his forehead, as though it would make him feel better. Many images flashed through his mind. Most of them were from when he was young. Those scenes were messy and there wasn't a single timeline. He couldn't even see the exact image. But he could vaguely remember that there was always someone who liked to push him down. As a boy, every time he wanted to throw someone out, he found that he couldn't lift that guy at all. That feeling was too intense. It was so intense that he couldn't remember anything when he tried to hold it back. Qin family's inner courtyard. Movie Queen wasn't around. Deputy Zhang watched Qin Mo lying on the bed, feeling a wave of self-blame. The doctor stood by the side, following the vein on the back of Qin Mo's hand, inserting the needle. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.